Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Montgomery, and our very first lesson this year in geometry is about points, lines, and planes. And those are the three things that make up everything else in geometry. In fact, since they're the basis of how we define everything else, we actually can't have real definitions for these three terms. We actually collectively know these as undefined terms. As a reminder, you will be turning in notes at the end of the chapter, so you will want to grab a piece of paper, or you will want to arrange to do notes on the Surface Pro if you would prefer. So just write down basically what I write down, and then any notes that you want to add to it. And these videos are great because you can always go rewatch them later if you need to. So how is a term undefined? Like, what does that mean? Well, here's what it means. It means we can kind of explain what it is, but only in sort of like this abstract way. We can't physically define what it is because we're using it to define everything else. So, for example, a point is our very first undefined term. And a point has no size or shape. The way we name a point is just with a capital letter. I've named this point P. Now, next up, our next undefined term is a line. I suppose I should write point over here. Point. Okay. Our next undefined term is a line. And you remember what a line looks like? Remember that the arrows just mean that this will go on forever in both directions. So a line is made up of points and extends infinitely in both directions. And so that's the way we draw a line. It has no thickness. It has no thickness. So even though in my drawing, the line has a thickness, like what I drew with a marker has a thickness, in reality, it does not have a thickness. That's just how we draw it. Now, a plane is any flat surface that extends infinitely in all directions. Okay, now after you watch this video, you're going to do some flashcards, and there might be a word or two difference in the definition there versus here, but it's the same idea. Now, a plane, an example of a plane is the board I'm writing on. Your table that you're working on at home, it's any flat surface, except it doesn't end like your table ends. It doesn't end like the board ends. It goes on forever. So because of that, it's actually kind of impossible to draw a plane. But we do the best we can. And the way we draw a plane, if we want to represent a plane in our drawings, we draw it like this, which you may sort of remember from earlier classes that you draw it like a parallelogram. That looks somewhat like a parallelogram. That's how we draw a plane. A plane is also named with a capital letter that you put into the corner. So I'm going to just name this plane X. I accidentally skipped over how to name a line. So let's jump back to that. There are two ways you can name a line. One way is by taking two of the points on the line, let's call this R and T, and we can name it by the two letters that are there. So the way we write that is line RT, and we put a little line label right above those letters. Sometimes people are a little bit lazier and they don't want to write all of that. So there's also another accepted way to name a line, and that's with a lowercase letter. So let's call this line M. And usually you put that lowercase letter near one of the arrows, doesn't matter which arrow. And so we could also call this line M. It's the same line, it just has two different names. It's kind of like this is its first name and its last name, and maybe this is its nickname. So those are our three undefined terms. So next we're going to explore two terms that have to do with how these different things can be sort of combined into one picture. The first one of those terms is called collinear. Collinear. C-O-L, two L's. C-O-L-L-I-N-E-A-R. Collinear. You might notice that inside the word collinear is the word line. And that actually tells us a little bit about it. It's any points that are on the same line. So for example, I can label A, B, C, Q, L. A, B, C, Q, and L would be collinear. Sometimes you'll hear the phrase non-collinear. If you ever hear the phrase non-collinear, that would be like if I added another point here. M is not collinear or non-collinear with A, B, C, D, Q, and L, because it's not on the same line with them. So we've got collinear, we can get non-collinear. Next up is coplanar. Coplanar actually can include, see how it has the word plane sort of in there? So it's any geometric figures that are on the same plane. Any geometric figures that are on the same plane. What are some examples of geometric figures? Well, points could be there. So maybe we name this plane Y, and I put a point X on there. I could also put some lines on my plane. Maybe I put line L on there. There's something we're going to learn called a segment, something like this. Maybe I put segment AB on there. So line L, point X, and segment AB would all be considered coplanar. If I added a point up here, maybe I'll call that Z. Point Z is non-coplanar because it's not on the plane with the other three objects. Okay. I think we have one more type of term to talk about, and that is intersection. So that's what we're going to end our video with. Let's switch colors. Intersection. Well, that squeaky noise is annoying. Okay, so an intersection between two or more geometric figures are all of the points, two or more geometric figures have in common. It's all of the points that these figures have in common with one another. So we're going to explore very quickly a couple of different options. You can have two lines that intersect. Sometimes people leave off the arrows just for quickness. I'm going to do that here. I have two lines that intersect. Well, those lines only have one point in common. I'll call it point A. So we would say that point A is the intersection of these two lines. Something else that can intersect are two planes. You might need to re-watch the video to get this part of the drawing. Here's one plane. I'm going to draw another plane. So what this picture is supposed to look like, it's supposed to be like if you have something that's horizontal, flat, like the floor or the ceiling, and then something vertical, like a wall. And those two things are going to meet. And notice where they meet, right here is a line. So when two planes intersect, you get a line. Now there's one last scenario that can happen. What if you have a line and a plane that intersect? What happens then? So there are two things that can happen there. One thing that could happen is that the line goes through the plane. The way you draw this is like this. Now what this would be in real life, it would be like if you had a piece of paper and then you stabbed your pencil through it. The pencil stabs one hole in the paper, and that hole would be a point on the paper. So that's one scenario. Another scenario is, what if the line is just on the plane? That means that it would have all of the points on the line in common with the plane. So the intersection with this guy would just be a point, but the intersection with this guy would be the entire line. That wraps up our video for today. I believe the instructions now are to open up the link on the, to go through the vocab. So go ahead and check go ahead and check the slides that are on our course page.